to ask these D&I leaders as many questions as possible. And we're going to take them up as we, go through the session. So today we have Zainab Patel. She is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at KPMG India. We also have Vinod. She's the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at ThoughtWorks. Thank you, Zainab, and thank you, Tina, for giving us another opportunity to bring you on this panel and have a fruitful discussion.
You're welcome.
Correct.
Thank you for having us here, Regina.
So the first thing I would like to talk about, we are all in this really trying time, and we've been put in this really stressful situation due to COVID. So let us start off the discussion. And Tina, this is my question to you. How did COVID impact your inclusion initiatives?
I think one of the things, although we complained so much about, having to travel to work in, in this traffic-filled Bangalore, and heading back home, and the challenges of working in the office space. One of the things I think most of us has realized in these last few months of the pandemic is that how much we miss the social interactions and the connections that come with being part of the workplace. And I think that has been one of the biggest challenges of remote work, is that lack of social connection, right? Especially in the tech and knowledge work sector, and probably in most other sectors as well. A lot of organizations are trying to implement work from anywhere, meaning you don't necessarily need to work from home, but you can work from anywhere, right? And the key questions organizations are asking is that how will we sustain and build on existing organizational culture? Because each organization has its own unique culture, right? And it's important, irrespective of where you work from, that essence of the culture, that essence of belonging that people have when they're part of that organization and culture needs to carry on. And how do you bring that about when you are not under one roof, at least for a few hours in a day? And so that is something that organizations are grappling with, leadership teams are grappling with, and trying to understand. How do we build a sense of belonging in community from afar? And how will we maintain and build client relationships, particularly thinking about trust and transparency, right? And that's very, very important in the current context, right? So if you look at, initiatives, I think, for example, one of the things that we have actively started doing is create an exclusive space in our intranet on thought worker wellness, where we only focus, the entire focus is around thought worker wellness. We've provided a lot of enhanced services with our EAP. We're offering one-on-one counseling sessions where required. We also ran a couple of internal surveys, and we call this, the pulse check, the COVID pulse check and the wellness survey. Specifically because, in spite of everything else, there's a lot around our personal lives that is impacting the way we work from home as well. Working from home is not unique to a lot of us, right? Like in ThoughtWorks, we could always work from home. We had the option of working from home, but in the current context means there are kids who are also, not going to school and studying from home and doing remote classes. It means that you do not have probably the house help that you used to have. You probably have additional people also working from home. And so you have the shared space, shared noise, shared responsibilities. And how do you deal with all that is something. And not too surprisingly, right, work-life balance has been one of the primary aspects or that organizations are focusing on today, right? How do you provide that safe space? How do you provide, the space for people to come and say, hey, the current whatever norms you have, whatever team contracts you have is not working, and we need to look at something different, something unique. I need something customized for me. I need more flexibility. How do you create that safe space for people to come and talk about it, right? And there are other aspects as well, which is around, earlier there were things that you did remotely. like inclusive practices, right? Like you celebrated, we celebrated the Pride Month remotely, and we shared stories, and we did social media campaigns. We had we had people doing games and all of that. But remote has its own set of perks and also drawbacks. And how do you create that people connect when you're doing these things remotely becomes very, very important. Currently, we're thinking about how do we celebrate Mental Health and Wellness Day on October 10th, right? And we had actually sent out a note to the entire office asking people, how do you want to celebrate? And they said, please, not another Zoom meeting or a webinar. It's another add-on thing. So then how do you innovate in this? And innovation becomes very, very critical in times like this, right? How do you ensure people connect? How do you ensure that you innovate as well as stay connected? And how do you offer unique experiences for people? I can tell you has been one of our biggest challenges when it comes to inclusion strategy. And of course, there are the usual, right? The benefits have been enhanced, work from home support, budgets have been enhanced, all of that. Support system have been enhanced. But beyond that, how do you innovate in creating in ensuring people connect has been one of the biggest learnings during this time. Over to you, Zainab.
So Zainab, I would like to ask you the same question. And interestingly enough, Tina pointed out that your family has become your co-workers. So interesting situation. And KPMG is a huge workforce. So you would have faced your own set of challenges. So how did COVID impact inclusion initiatives at KPMG?
I need to start off with a disclaimer that KPMG might probably fire me after listening to this. But so, it all started with the Drink story about us wanting to do International Women's Day in March. And that's when some of the early precautions around around COVID came in. And a lot of workshops got cancelled, even if they were on the weekend around 8th of March, because the office had put an advisory, not more than 25 people, you had to get approvals, etc. And we said that, okay, here is all of our plans that we put together. We had we had a couple of interesting dance sessions, etc., which was dance drama and exploring your inner emotions, etc., and not typical Women's Day celebrations. And from there, we had to really put on our thinking hats and said, okay, here is all of the IWD messaging that we wanted to do, what the campaign that we wanted to run, not going to work from a physical space perspective, but we need to push it on the virtual space. So we did had quite a bit of failures around that, because immediately to move on from a physical mode to a virtual mode was tough. So we did learn a few lessons in that. I think once we switched over to understanding that virtual mode of working and interaction provides you much more better space, more level field to go and do work, we realized that all of our I&D efforts actually took off from the ground very effectively. So learnings on that, we kind of had the pride, starting with the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia around mid of May. Then the whole of June being devoted to Pride Month. So we had multiple sessions, comms campaign, knowing your pronouns and lexicon, etc. And then we had the whole of July dedicated as I&D month for us at KPMG. So for each of the pillars that we focused, we had quizzes and interactions and learning sessions. And we realized that the people who joined our sessions, so at an average, if we say that there was a particular session which attracted 250, 300 people, and that's a good number. That's a very good number for people. But we realized that our sessions were 500, 600 plus. And then we had to kind of have more sessions because it didn't work for all of them. So we had to actually plan more and more sessions. And actually for us, from that perspective, it started making sense to program our monies more effectively. So while we did not have any significant cut on the initiatives, we were asked to spend judiciously, and of course there was no travel, etc. No, we had different reality stalls for persons with disability, etc. All of that had to be cut off because there wasn't a scope. But I think in the last 3-4 months, where all of our engagement is now looking at a virtual reality perspective, we've been able to successfully do town halls with the KPMG network of women, have launched our LGBT and PWD ERGs, done a successful month-long IND campaign. And as Tina said, we are actually looking at a 3-week-long mental health campaign, which we are going to be talking on the value of kindness and happiness. So there's a kindness and happiness campaign. How can you be kind to yourself? How do you be realistic? How do you learn to be happy? We do have a session on mental health in terms of helping people understand what are stuff that causes them stress, how do they manage stress, also kind of linking them to another unique program which is run by our employee assistant program, one-to-one, in terms of creating mental health buddies at work. But if you ask me, Regina, I think it takes creativity for a team to understand the pulse of the organization. And as to, today, I totally echo what Tina says, that there is a fatigue of listening. There is a fatigue of going to another Zoom session. Because one is that as we are sitting in our homes and continue to work from our homes, we realize that we've been bombarded with so many Zoom calls, so many advisories, etc., that the time to do some personal reflection, the time to look at it from an innovative perspective is missing. And hence innovation is key. Just like care of employees was core, so innovation is key. So we have to look at gamification. We would have to look at alternative models of taking your interventions to people. Otherwise there is going to be another a glass ceiling between us and them in terms of getting to them with messages. So I personally feel that for us at KPMG, and for me, my team especially, we did not see the engagement results as encouraging as the entire last year. So in the 4 months that we kind of looked at, I'm only talking about May until now, that has been super rewarding for us as an inclusion and diversity effort, actually.
All right. So thank you for that answer. And Tina, my next question for you is, I know that you had an initiative called working with, so interning with Pride, right? And I think that went virtual, and that's your plan for the future. So can you elaborate and tell us what gave you the idea about, making that event virtual, that internship virtual?
Actually, this year has been a game changer for us in terms of a lot of initiatives that we've run with external audiences or with external people participating. So Vapasi, our technical training program that we do for women technologists who are on a career break. Usually it's done in one of our offices. So that's gone virtual, and we just announced it a few weeks back. And we are getting applications. So the whole concept around how do we do this remotely, right? Because right from providing laptops to the participants and providing all the facilities for them to come and learn undisturbed and train undisturbed in the ThoughtWorks offices, that is going to go away. And so we are doing this virtually. So we're looking at a virtual space where people can code, so that you don't have to be dependent on certain software requirements for your laptop, things like that. So there's a lot of thought process going around that. In fact, we've cut down, earlier Vapasi used to be for 8 hours at a minimum per day. So now we've extended it from 4 weeks to 5 weeks and made it 6 hours per day, so that when you are working from home, you have the flexibility. So let's see how that goes, because we've announced it. We're getting good responses for participation. And it'll be interesting after Vapasi how the internship goes when we offer internship to some of the participants. Interning with Pride, 2020, like I've told a lot of people, we had a lot of plans on doing a lot of things in-house. And interning with Pride is something that we hope to launch soon. I'm doubtful whether we will do it in Q4 this year, but 2021, definitely we will be launching interning with Pride. possibly virtually or a mix of virtual and face-to-face. We need to see how it goes based on the scenario. But Interning with Pride is an internship program that we offer people from the LGBTQ plus community. Again, it's a technical program because one of our goals as a technology company is to increase the percentage of marginalized communities in tech. Tech is seen as a very elitist space, right? Where only certain people are, and it's a very homogeneous crowd, if not. And how do we make tech a more inclusive, a more diverse space? In our own little small ways, I think we have our goals. And so that is going to happen. In fact, during the lockdown, we announced Prajna, partnering with Periphery, which is a mentoring program for the transgender community. And we helped Periphery design the entire program, especially during times like this, right? We've realized that upskilling is very important, especially again for a community like trans people who have been extremely marginalized, right? And really need the support of people who are part of a particular tech community to be able to support them. And so we helped Periphery build the program. And we also was the first participating corporate in the program. And we were just shocked by the response because people were really stretched during this, during these times, right? Working from home and all the other anxiety and all the other issues that they dealt with. Many thought workers, close to 80 plus thought workers signed up as mentors. In fact, today we had a call with the Periphery team and mentors shared their stories of how enriching the experiences have been through the entire experience. So this program, I think, went live during the pandemic times, at least in the last 2-3 months, and has been a huge learning experience. I think it's important, very important to see how we also learn as a community. And so there are a lot of things that we do on the creative side as well. For example, there are thought workers themselves who offer courses, like you'll have the mandala courses or something around. There are groups that are talking about having your garden kitchens, your terrace gardens, and your own small setup. So there are communities that are thriving during these times. But again, like I said, and know multiple times, innovation is very, very important here. But some programs have happened, and I think there will be a lot of learnings, especially when we do it for the first time. And based on those learnings, we'll see how we can improvise further.
All right. So Zainab, you also talked about the importance of innovation during these trying times. Can you help us understand a few of the initiatives which KPMG especially took up during COVID to help diversity and inclusion?
I think for one is what we did very significantly was looked at launching our own employee resource groups on LGBT. So we already had an ally program first, but we decided to go ahead into this. And as we speak, what we've done is launch this ally of inclusion program, which gives people, which one is it upskills them to be an ally. So not necessarily only signing up or wearing a lanyard or a badge as an ally, but basically upskilling you in terms of what is your requirement, asking them to sign up a pledge, and also committing hours from their daily work schedule to help in the entire ally business. The second thing what we've been working on is an online gamification module for unconscious bias. I'll be happy to talk about it more once we get results from it, but just to give you a brief overview, is that all of us talk about unconscious bias on a day-to-day basis, whether it's gender-based bias, bias on the grounds of religion, body, ethnicity, etc. But how does one kind of look at institutionalizing it within the organization? Because at any given point of time, one or two major issues that come in front of organization is, one is how do we look at gender equality, the second is how do we look at unconscious bias, because bias is so prevalent, and how do you measure changes on that? So what we did is, while we looked at a specific program for our leadership team, looking at different issues of unconscious bias and coming up with a specifically for the leadership team, but for the entire AM and M plus group, we had 3 different modules looking at gamification, looking at specific scenes which have come up from real life incidents that have happened within the organization. We recently completed a firm-wide inclusion and diversity survey, which was taken close to by about 20% of the office's population. And they gave some very concrete feedback in terms of what do they see as diversity appreciation. What do they see as specific examples of victimization or things where they have been witness to harassment, discrimination. And we've kind of looked at merging all of that together in this. So one is, while we continue to do the steps drama kind of a ritual where you get people to look at various drama based interventions, we also wanted to make sure that it's part of their learning and it's part of the mandatory thing, just like poshes. And it will help to kind of break down some. So one important thing that's also coming out from that is, how do you then become better culture catalysts within the organization? So we want then this group of culture catalysts to actually take an implicit association test to see what are their biases and how are they going to be working on their flows within their team to make it more diverse and inclusive. And then they look at 5% flexibility within their key performance indicators to report back on what have they done work on the allyship space and what have they done work on the culture space. These are the some bits of innovation when it comes to IND. But the challenge is not in terms of bringing to light a lot of ideas or looking at humor or looking at town hall based model. The question is, how do you sustain the efforts over a period of time when you do know that in the near future, perhaps you or your colleagues may never be sharing the same kind of office space that you did before March. And that really calls not only for innovation, that also calls for the next level of thinking, that one has to kind of evolve themselves to be thinking that, okay, gone are the days where you could afford the luxury of having 50 people sit in a physical classroom trying to interact. Now most of it is going to happen virtually, even if people do manage to get back to office in, say, January or March or whenever. It's still going to be with social distance, and whether organizations which actually have the resources to invest in that. So one is, for us, it was building the capacities and constantly working with the senior management to ensure that our budgets are not cut. And I'm not talking about this as innovation. This is basically survival techniques. Because if the leadership cuts down the budgets or asks you to kind of reprogram it, I mean, there are many words to use, but in short, if they decided to cut off the budgets, because the easiest to chop off is employee engagement and INT and travel, that how are you going to keep the scope or the morale high? And whenever you come back to office, the issue of diversity and inclusion is not gone. So how are you going to look at inclusion then? Do you then restart the entire picture or make constant sustained goals in order to reach where you kind of have your vision for?
Right. So some interesting points you brought up, Zainab. Tina, would you like to chime in, and you agree with what Zainab said?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, while we don't talk about it in events like this, being able to have the right budget, and to be able to bring in the right experiences for people, because you need some bit of external help as well to help facilitate and bring and innovate in this space. And how do you do that without the right budgets in place? It becomes important. Um, but when you talk about the whole work from anywhere, one of the things I think we also think about is, what is your definition of the safe workspace, right? And when you talk about workplace conduct, do you keep online abuse, harassment, discrimination as just as the same and as efficiently as you would deal with your physical workspaces? And HR and DNI teams need to really innovate in this space and think about how do you create that space, and how do you create awareness around this, right? What are the best practices that need to be put in place? I think one of the challenges that I often hear people talk about is how, based on gender, cognitive differences, all of that, a lot of people struggle with virtual meetings, right? You don't get a space to talk, you don't get a space to express yourself. And there are people who will always hog the limelight, make we make the most of this time offered to them without thinking about inclusive practices in meetings. And so these are small nuances that we've kept in mind when we put together like an inclusive team starter kit, where we are talking about, redefining your team social contracts. Okay, usually you say, hey, we will meet at this time. These are some of the best practices. How do you redefine that in the current context becomes important. I think, what is your zero tolerance policy to any discrimination that happens, irrespective of whether it is virtual or face to face, right? How do you ensure that gets carried forward? What are you saying in your chat groups? How do you ensure that you're creating inclusive workspaces everywhere, is also important. One of the things we often don't speak about enough is this whole virtual space and this always on fatigue, right? Being on video all the time can be extremely tiring for a lot of people. And when you're not on video, does that mean that you are not contributing effectively, or you're not listening, or you're just you're not there? So how do you ensure that people are empathetic towards others' experiences and others personal situations is also, I think these are nuanced things that I think we often may not include when we think about larger inclusion in the workplace, but are very, very important. Unconscious bias, I think, becomes important, especially in this context, because we're hiring a lot of new people. A lot of people are being onboarded virtually. That how much do we keep these new people in mind when they're part of teams, right? Because we always go back and reach out to people we are familiar with. So unconscious bias in the context of the virtual space, I think, becomes important. How do you ensure that you have accessible tools, in terms of software, in terms of everything else that you have to offer? Accessibility becomes very, very important, especially for people with disability. And hence, how do you ensure these things are kept in mind? Keeping the whole inclusion context is very, very important. Yeah.
Right. So interesting that you brought this up, and I had an opportunity to be part of a really interesting conversation recently. So I was talking about the benefits of work from home and how the future of workforce and the future of work will be all around, working virtually. But she pointed out a very good point. When you talk about diversity and inclusion, and when you talk about women who are, let's say, in an abusive relationship, then you're not providing a safe space by, sending them back to that scary place. And when you talk about people from the LGBTQ plus community who have not come out to their parents, whoever they're living with, then again, you're not providing a safe space. Now, since you were also talking about the benefits and the negatives of working virtually, what are your thoughts around this topic?
So I'll tell you exactly what Tina said. Like, I live closer to Noida and I travel to Gurgaon every day, and I spend close to 3.5 to 4 hours traveling in the morning and in the evening combined. And the first few months were extremely happy for me, that not having to get up in the morning, not having to get up to go to work, etc. And then it gave me also time to do my other work. Fortunately, I still privileged to have someone to help with the cooking, etc. And then came COVID, and then that kind of shattered most of the stuff people had to cook. I think there are two situations. One here is that, the joy of missing out versus the fear of missing out. So I think each one of us has a very different personality type. And by nature, all of us crave social spaces to come together, to meet and to interact. I think there is between us, there is a certain sense of restlessness now, and we crave to go back to office, not only to kind of go back to our desk and to our systems and to find that comfort of walking to work, but to that we miss the office banter, we miss the cafeteria chat, we miss the camaraderie that we share. And in all situations, Zoom doesn't kind of make up for it, or Teams doesn't make up for it. And then what does that happen? While in May, June, a lot of people said the future is work from home, I think there is now some level of change in thinking. there are people who are also considering kind of balancing it out between working from home or the new working space, because I think people are also craving for that one social contact. And whether it's your 6 feet office at home or whether it is the actual physical office, there are people who need that, and people will wanting to go back to that. So what we did is, in KPMG, we actually opened our offices in June in terms of KPMG India, because we have a client facing role. A lot of us are working with the BFSI sector, and the financial services required people to be back. So there were people who were actually on the field working with banks, etc. But people who also had a client facing role and absolutely had to be in office had to go back to office. But today we've lost the comfort of having calling our particular desk our desk, because everything is on a hot desking method. You go, you run, you give a request that you're attending office, you run a QR code, and you're allocated a desk. I think these are some of the new realities that we need to prepare ourselves for. And while this is a boon, say, for people who come in from different marginalized communities, people who have multiple responsibilities, it also kind of doesn't factor in that what happens is when the person is not able to draw the thin line between working from home and working at home, or working for home, and those lines are actually getting essentially blurred. These are results that came out from our dipstick survey, where people don't tell us that calls that start at 8 in the morning don't necessarily end at 6 in the evening or 7 in the evening, or people, if they are working across multiple time zones, then the lines get further blurred, and then we have to send out revised communication asking people to be mindful of people's privacy, to be mindful of the situation that they are in, to be mindful that they may not have that kind of cordoned off area where you can use as an office or whatever. So I think what we've also kind of worked on the last 6 months is a little bit of humanizing of the employee workforce, both from the fact that you need to care for them. Yes, you need to prioritize them, and only when you care them will they be futuristic ready, will they be able to revision, to be part of the new vision. But the fact is also creating a human element, and just not aimlessly pushing for the number of hours that you're clocking in every day. I think all of these require change, and this require change at multiple levels. Also, like for example, what was true as of March 31st, from a performance indicator perspective, from a business perspective, might not really hold true in on 31st March 2021. And how are we going to then look at performance then? If it is sheer on the size, if it's basically on the size of bringing in business, and how does that affect? How do you look at retention versus promotion? Because a lot of us are now struggling at retaining our employee workforce, but people are going to be looking at, so all of these matters in the new workforce. And a true sense of a leader that we are looking forward to is the one who's able to tackle these kind of questions, not only look at sustaining the workforce or the business. It's looking at effective management of all of these concerns.
All right. So I think we've all seen an increase in mental health issues. So Tina, I would like to ask you if you can help us understand what organizations can do to help their employees cope with this increased level of stress.
Yeah. So I think the awareness of mental health has just increased so much, particularly this year post the pandemic. I think it's very good, right from different industries to countries. I think you often see news items where we're talking about mental health, awareness, the stigma attached to it, and how many people are going through anxiety, depression, and the increase in suicide amongst the young community. Even in countries like India, where it's, you don't often see people talk about mental health and wellness, right? And in the workplace per se, I think it's something that we had always prioritized, but I think it's doubled in terms of effort, especially during the pandemic. And of course, there's the usual support that's there, right? There is the EAP and enhanced support and counseling and all of that. But there have been a lot of learnings as well, Regina, over the last few months. For example, we've had a lot of people who deal with who are in high people touch point roles, right? like people who are managers, people who are, are playing the HR type of a role, or people connect role, their ability to have conversations around mental health and wellness really needs to be good. And if they are unable to have those conversations, they are unable to set direction and ask the person who has a challenge, or set direction for that person themselves. So one of the things that we did was we ran peer-to-peer counseling workshops for especially this group that is dealing with people and had high people touch point roles. So we've offered that. We've also offered customized, sessions for people, where we are asking them for teams, because each team is unique, right? Each team practices are unique. For example, a HR team practices is very different from a technical team that's working with a UK client, right? And so the people practices are different, the way you work are different, the way you function as a team are different, the way you connect as a team is different. Also, how distributed you are. Are you all in 5 different countries and still delivering? Because time zone then plays an important role. Cultural context plays an important role. So keeping all of this in mind, right, then you need to look at it not from a region or a location, but you actually need to really delve down to the point where, as teams, how you're dealing with it, and then as individuals, right? And hence, one of the things which we are offering is team specific support, where we are asking people to explore feelings around mindfulness, talk about resilience, talk about how do you support each other as a team, what are your schedules like? Is there one person, or are there a set of people who are always the ones who are taking in a larger stress than others in the team? So how do you cope with this, right? Are you empathetic towards people's personal situations? So these are things that we are offering as well. And of course, there are the usual webinars, there are the usual sessions, and there are the mindfulness sessions that we've run, all of that. But I think talking about mental health has created a space where people are comfortable sharing, even if it means sharing with someone within their team. So sharing with someone in their homes, or saying, I am stressed, I can't handle this, I need help. I think it's not 100% there, but I think we've started on the journey where people are comfortable, or many people are comfortable having those conversations. And I always say that the limitations of the workplace are there. So the workplace cannot be your total 100% solution for everything, right? How are you dealing with your mental health issues personally? If you're a person who wakes up and looks at social media first thing in the morning, trust me, you are going to have mental health issues. And the last thing that you see is your phone, and you constantly in touch with the news and what are the COVID numbers in your city right around you. It is going to be. So how do you deal with it personally? How do you deal with it as a family? How do you support each other, a family? How do you support with it within your network of family, of friends, of colleagues, your inner circle, right? All of that becomes important. So while workplaces need to take responsibility, I think it's not only the responsibility of the workplaces. It, as a community at large and as a society at large, we need to be more comfortable, and we need to understand what are the best practices to improve mental health. It's not like all of us are there. I don't think I'm there myself, but I think it's important to deal with it. Also, there's a lot of anxiety, and you hear news of death more often now than you have in the past, right? And dealing with that can be extremely, extremely painful. And you hear people, committing suicide, or people dying of COVID, or anxiety issues, or someone going through health-related issues, all of that. And during these times, the only thing that we can offer people and we can offer ourselves is mindfulness, is offer empathy, and it's very important. Self-care is very important, and that's something that I think we all need to take care of. Kindness, like Zainab pointed out, is all very important. Yes.
Right. So Zainab, what do you think about Tina's view? Would you like to chime in?
Well, I think I'm totally on board with her view. I mean, fact remains that there was a point of time before contracting COVID that I was constantly cued into looking at COVID numbers by the hour, and it would actually stress me out if I didn't see the numbers increasing. I mean, I'm being extremely true to you that I had caught into a social media frenzy, and only when I was diagnosed with COVID and I was going through my phase of the medical aspects of it, did I realize the need to detox, the need to take a break from social media, read less of news on social media, etc. But I think one thing one thing is very important, and that again comes from what Tina and I both have said, is we need to respect and value and appreciate our employees at the workplace. And this is what something I think every one of us does it in our organization. We also kind of structured it. We ran an appreciation week, more than 40,000 messages across people, talking about the fact that just appreciating you for the role that you've played for them, either in a personal space or professional space, and the amount of positivity it has generated. The second thing, I think all of us now realize that mental health is not something that affects somebody else. It has affected all of us, and to us in varying degrees. And no one can really say that I am not going to be a person who's affected by stress because of the situation, the economy, the health condition, death, disease, all of this, longing for comfort. Many of us are still away from our parents, our family members, our friends, or people, spaces that we would want to be. So we learn to appreciate each other. And that's why, I mean, my parting message is that as we approach World Mental Health Day on 10th of October, don't let it be like another day that goes by. Use it as an opportunity to spread kindness and happiness, because as human beings, we are really not taught to be kind. We learn it by seeing others. It's not something that we've been born with. When we see acts of kindness, we feel happy. We feel elated. We want you to wear a green ribbon when somebody asks you, even if it's a virtual ribbon or something. Make it a point. Talk about issues of mental health. Mental health is not only about suicide and depression. It has many, many more effects. It affects the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you think. And be a mental health warrior. I mean, a lot of us are corona warriors. Be a mental health warrior, because the second pandemic is going to be the pandemic of mental health issues.
All right, so thank you for giving your views. So we have a couple of questions which some of the attendees have posted, and here is your opportunity to ask us more questions. So I'm going to read out the questions, and Tina and Zainab, either one of you can take the question. So the first question is, D&I initiatives are even more crucial during COVID, but sadly many companies have put this on a back burner. So how can organizations keep going with their initiatives? So either one of you, just let me know who would like to take this up.
I'll take a stab. I threatened my boss that I will leave if he cuts the budget. He still cut the budget, but not too much. So he shaved off about 20% of the budget. And I told him that in October, which is our midterm review, is we will review the budget as to where we stand. I think one is whoever dons the responsibility of either being the D&I lead sponsor, the pillar leads within your organization looking at gender, etc., or the D&I person. They carry the responsibility on their shoulders to be able to convince the management not to kind of let the guard down. Because it is at this time that an organization's true D&I climate and true D&I phase will actually emerge. This is your trying time to get women who are on on returnship, persons with disability, LGBTIQ, whatever, look at the, SC, ST, OBC community, minority group. And this is your chance. We love to talk about the gig workforce. We love to talk about fashionable things. But you have to realize that this has to first start from an internal effort. Because the moment you go back to office, you are going to if you're going to cut down budgets, if you're not going to be investing in D&I effort, you're going to be negating all the growth that you've probably done on the D&I effort, and that will lead you to a bigger problem than when you started off with. So my issue is very simple, is you tell people and convince people the fact that we need resources. Even if it is trimmed down resources, this is the bare minimum stuff that we need to do from an engagement perspective, of an employee resource group perspective, and we would require this to be moving ahead.
All right. So the next question is a very interesting one, and it talks about the imposter syndrome. So the attendee wants to ask, imposter syndrome is observed in almost every other domain, be it education or career. Is there anything which D&I friendly companies plan to do to deal with it?
I think creating a safe space becomes very important, and people where you have programs, like for example, you have programs, you create spaces where people start believing themselves and what they have to offer. So are you say, for me, I just wanted a quick correction on the question. Are you saying, is there an imposter syndrome within the D&I space, or is the question around imposter syndrome in the organization? So I just wanted a clarity around that.
All right, so we'll wait for the attendee to correct us, but I think they want to know in the organization, if I'm not wrong.
I'm just looking at the question. I think imposter syndrome is also very personal, right? You would see, and also very unique as well to certain sectors. You would see that from a gender perspective, you would see a lot of times women, people from gender minority communities face the imposter syndrome much more than, men. You would also see from a race perspective, you would see people of color facing the imposter syndrome more than, the white community. And even within an organization, you would find, depending on your cognitive skills, depending on your background, where you come from, sometimes your ability to speak English well, right? You feel like, okay, am I good enough? Is this something that just happened by chance, or am I really good enough? And one thing is that I think building self-confidence is very important, and offering an organization should be able to offer you the space to believe in yourself, and which is why organizational culture becomes very, very important. How do you create that space where I can bring my whole self to work, where I can talk about areas where I am not good enough, and where I excel at, and where you are accepting of the fact that you can contribute effectively in this space because you're really good at it, right? And one thing I think, especially, and may not be directly, you may not see the direct benefits of it, but specifically having role models, right, or people in leadership teams that are representative of a diverse community really helps you overcome your imposter syndrome. But one of the things I would say is that get help, get a mentor, get support, and there are a lot of self-help mechanisms to deal with the imposter syndrome. Trust me, I go through it myself a lot of times, right? Even when I look at the D&I space, the D&I space itself is very vast, right? So if I am good at in a particular space, for example, if I understand people and policies better, or if I understand gender, or if I understand women in the workplace better, a specific section, or if I understand people with disability space better, there are multiple other things that I don't understand in depth, right? I probably understand at a surface level, or understand to some extent, but if you ask me deep dive into questions and ask me, I may not have the answers. And I think it's okay for us to say we don't know. It's okay for us to say that, hey, this is something that I'm still on that journey of learning, and this is something that I can ask someone to, or I can come back to you with inputs on. But I think this feeling that we have to be experts at everything, and when we're not, it makes us feel like we are not really there, is also a challenge that a lot of us face. But I hope I've answered the question. I've interpreted it in the best way I could, but I hope that helps.
So the third question, and I would like to get both of your views on this one. So, and this question is, by the way, a big one. So it would require a separate session in itself, but we'll try to answer it in the short period of time that we have. What's your take on same-sex marriage, and how will it impact somebody's life at work?
I'll quickly take an answer. I think same-sex marriage or a gender-neutral marriage, for that matter, should not impact anyone at work, because that's very personal decision. I think what we need to work towards is creating facilities which are gender neutral in its approach within the organization. That's an easier way to take, whether it's insurance, it is leave benefits, etc. I think a lot of Indian companies as well as multinationals have already worked on this part. So to understand the legality of whether that's going to be possible, that's going to be a reality in the near future or no, is of course left for the courts to decipher. But there are a lot of people, like for example, I got married to my partner legally, but we got married in South Africa. So he is Indian. So, but both of us decided to get married in South Africa because the law allowed us to get married there. And I have not come and looked at registering this marriage in India. But since then I have transitioned and changed my sex. I carry his name as my second name, and no one has asked me for a marriage registration certificate yet. It's easier said than done, but because my gender markers are female. But it may be difficult if you have the same sex gender marker for both. But as we said, that's a topic for another day. I think organizations should be prepared from a benefits perspective to look at neutrality as an approach rather than to look at the partisan approach. And whatever be the outcome of the resolution or of the court battle, because it's again going to be a very lengthy one, because the cases now, there are various high courts. Kerala, Chennai, Madras High Court and Delhi High Court had 3 specific cases, but there are lots of cases which are where the high courts are allowing people to live in together. So that also has an implication. If you have a policy which allows your domestic partner or your live-in partner to be covered in the insurance as
well. Yeah, bang on, Zainab. I follow this fortnightly column by Devdutt Patnaik on Who is a Hindu, right? And last week he had spoken about can gay marriage be part of the Hindu culture? And I think the very tenet of what his response was it, as long as it's provided it's based on dharma of compassion, reciprocity, and social responsibility. But who are we to say, the question is, who are we to say whether it is right, wrong? I think it's the two people's decision who are in that relationship, and they decide for themselves. And I don't think organizations should say anything about it and delve into that matter any more than that, right? What organizations can do is offer the support. For example, same-sex partners are covered under a medical insurance policy. And no questions asked, right? Absolutely no questions asked. And you bring in a partner, anyone of your choice. And I don't think and providing and having a culture and sensitizing people around that is very, very important. But that said, I think what we can do is that whenever there is an opportunity for organizations to rally, to support such initiatives or to support publicly, I think we should be able to, because this is all about social change, right? And if we can support and rally like the way 377 got overruled, I think we will be able to bring about change in our society. But I think organizations can play a key role in this as well, in terms of offering safe spaces for people.
All right. So I have a very, very a good question, and the trick here is to not to name your own organization, because I know KPMG and ThoughtWorks are doing wonderfully in the D&I space. So the question here is, which company would you vote as one of the best for their D&I policies?
I think I'm going to vote for ThoughtWorks.
Thank you, Zainab. Oh, that's very, very humbling. Thank you. I think there are so many organizations doing such beautiful things in the D&I space, and there is always this like for example, we don't do much in the people with disability space, and I think it has a lot to do with the way we work, our practices, all of that, and that's something that we are working on figuring out this year and next year. But there are a lot of people doing a lot of great work in the D&I space, and I've had my share of learnings from all of them, and I can't really pick out one company, sorry.
On second thoughts, I think it's very difficult. It's easy if you're participating in a benchmarking study to say that which company has the most inclusive policies. But if you actually look at stuff on the ground, because it's not only the companies with the best policies, it's companies with the best culture, with the best applicability of the policies. Because sometimes you may have the best policies on paper, but there's a total disconnect between what the policy states, what it is supposed to be in word and spirit, and what people experience on the ground. I would say that the Indian DNI scene is constantly evolving. We are not where we were 5 years ago. And I find the fact that we're looking at issues of mental health, we're looking at issues of resilience, we're looking at issues crossing across the multiple pillars that we are working with. So nobody thought about multiculturalism as an issue which was there 5 years ago. But today we talk about it. And I think that's a sign of an evolved policy. And anyone who kind of looks into these issues should be considered as an organization with the best policies on DNI.
So one thing I think we always look at what is the business benefits of the DNI, right? And I remember when we started ThoughtWorks, when our founder started ThoughtWorks 25 years back, he said, I care a damn about business benefits. Think about how, is it the right thing to do? It is, right? How can your organization not be representative of the society that we live in from a diversity standpoint? Of course, there are business benefits, but is that the only lens that you look at DNI, right? And how do you bring about positive social change within your society if you don't, as a corporate or in an organization, partake in that as someone that's responsible enough to do that? And I think as an organization, we've been through that journey. So the intersection of positive social change and DNI, I think, is the one. And like Zainab said, right, policies that are cut in stone, like you say that, this is a policy, we can't really go beyond this. That becomes the deal breaker in a lot of ways. And being able to customize and do something that's exclusive for people's needs, I think, becomes very important. I am a huge proponent of safe space and being able to offer that safe space to people, right? You may not be giving the fanciest of salaries or having all of the policies that you want, but offering that safe space becomes very important.
Right. So that's well put. So the last question for the evening is, at individual level, how can anyone become a DNI enthusiast? And how can they start bringing a change one at a time? So I would like both of your views on this one.
I think at an individual level, I don't come with a background in HR and DNI. There are a lot around lived experiences. And I think in a country like ours, inequity and being able to see how that inequity impacts people at multiple levels, right? Whether it is opportunity, whether it is getting feeling safe, feeling protected, all of that matters. And I think my lived experiences have been so that has been very helpful. And I think if you can identify areas that you are passionate about, you start reading about it, you participate in groups, in external forums, in groups, in meetups that are talking about, or get-togethers where they particularly focus on this area. That becomes important. Finding forums where you can participate both within your organization and externally as well. And being able to voice and delve a little bit deeper and learn more. A lot of material. I think we have the privilege of more than enough information available to us, both online and to read. And so participating in that. And I think it's okay to while you're going on that learning journey, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to take 2 steps back and then take 4 steps forward in this journey. And that's how I have learned, and that's how I have, my journey has been. And I would say this is a space where you can truly have your calling. You can truly have your calling. So if you care about diversity and inclusion, start with one area and probably expand that to other areas, I would say.
All right. And Zainab, what about you? Would you like to take a crack at this one?
I think I totally agree with everything that Tina said, but I think one thing that you need to kind of look at is to be able to come out as allies, because We've talked a long time about coming out as LGBTQ, coming out as a marginalized community. But I think if you really want to be a true DNI enthusiast, you have to come out as an ally. You have to come out as an ally for persons with disability, on gender, on LGBTIQ issues, on multifarious issues. That is the core strength of being an enthusiast. An enthusiast may not become an evangelist, but the fact is that an enthusiast will stand up for something that's right, and that kind of differentiates you from the rest. And as you said, make an investment in your continuous learning program. Take a few DNI online classes. It exposes you to very different philosophies, very different thought processes, very different ways of engaging. And as Tina rightly said, that the the proof of the pudding is in eating it. When you volunteer your time, whether internally or externally or through community engagement forum, you get a first-hand experience of what a DNI enthusiast is. So if you see yourself in a crowd cheering someone or speaking on a panel or even listening, then you are a DNI enthusiast.
All right. With that, I would like to thank you, Zainab, and thank you, Tina, for giving us this opportunity again. This was a wonderful session, and we got to dive into a number of topics today. And I think we've also encouraged the people who attended this session, and we're trying to build better DNI policies and get into better DNI conversations through these sessions. Also, our next month's planner will be out on social media. So do follow us on our social media handles on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Stay tuned with us. We'll be coming up with more interesting topics, and we'll be bringing important leaders who are making a mark in the society. Thank you, everybody, for today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us here. Bye-bye.